Hello, welcome to the first ever Sportscast podcast. My name's Jordan and it's great to have you listening. Please subscribe or bookmark us on the streaming service that you're listening to us on. We are a podcast covering a wide range of sports. We aim to break down the week and the weekend's biggest events, plus look forward to the week ahead. I've been watching Formula One since I was 11 years old, and it's a sport that is really, really close to my heart. And I've also dabbled in football and golf throughout all of my life as well.
And for me, my background comes from playing football, playing rugby, playing hockey, but I guess more importantly now I just watch pretty much everything from football, anything down to golf, darts, ice hockey, anything that is remotely competitive for me.
Yeah, I'd say I'm the same, but more the US side of things. So your basketball, ice hockey, American football, even college sports when it's on. Mainly Premier League football.
So we'll kick off with the biggest event over the weekend, which was of course the prestigious Monaco Grand Prix. A number of teams were bringing upgrades to the weekend, but most notably being Mercedes. There was an air of secrecy around the paddock as from set-up on Wednesday, the Mercedes garages had large shields to protect whatever was lurking inside. The big reveal, side pods will be back. Will it make a difference to the rest of the season for Mercedes? We will see. In other news, Lewis Hamilton's rumoured £40 million move to Ferrari was denied in an interview, and McLaren released a very nice looking livery, a orange and white triple crown livery for the Monaco Grand Prix to celebrate the only team to have ever won the Triple Crown prestigious motorsports award. Qualifying was a very interesting session. Qualifying was one of the more entertaining ones of the season too. Perez, carrying way too much speed into turn one, crashes out in a bone-rattling fashion and will start from last place on Sunday. Stroll also out in Q2. He clipped the wall on a push lap in the final sector, but not before he'd clocked a good lap to finish, but not before he'd placed 14th on the grid for Sunday. Then it all happened in qualifying 3. Probably the most exciting qualifying session of the season so far. Esteban Ocon, absolutely fantastic lap, push lap, with 3 minutes to go, put himself on provisional pole. It was such a spectacle to see. Leclerc, chasing his third consecutive pole position, takes it by 8/100ths of a second. A minute later, Alonso also took provisional pole by 2/100ths of a second. But then Max Verstappen went into full focus mode and in the final sector pulls a 0.3 second delta to take pole by 0.084 seconds. Absolutely outstanding that Max Verstappen has managed to pull that out in one of the shortest sectors on the entire calendar, if not the shortest section on the sector on the entire calendar. Following his usual run of bad luck at Monaco, Charles Leclerc was given a 3-place grid penalty, rightly so, for impeding Lando Norris on a flying lap in the tunnel. Okay, spoiler warning for the race on Sunday. I'll be honest, it was a typical Monaco race. There wasn't a huge amount of overtaking. I think you, Liam, was telling me earlier that over the last 5 years, or minus COVID, there'd been probably about 20 overtakes or something like that.
Yeah, so I saw a graphic and last year there was 6 overtakes or so. I don't know if that was sort of net gained positions on the race or individual overtakes throughout the race. So there was quite a few today, but net positions people finished in and around where they was. 2021 it was about 4. 2020 I don't think there was any. I think that was the year of the horrific rain.
Yeah.
And then 2019 another 4 again. So it's always been single figure overtakes, sort of net gain positions as well.
I feel like Monaco and the Principality and the Kingdom and all that kind of thing, they kind of control, or they kind of show the FIA how they want to run their weekend, whereas it should be the opposite way around.
I think as well with Monaco, you have to look at the track. Yes, it's a street circuit, Baku is as well, but there's plenty of long straights, plenty of places for overtaking, but at Monaco, you've got maybe 2 or 3 semi-long straights around by the swimming pool, the pit straight, and leading off Casino Square. But even that straight in itself's got the quite high ridge that you have to swing right to avoid. So really, there's maybe 2 straights that you can look at and overtake, unless it's out of the casino tunnel, which we've seen things today.
Yeah, and unless you're Ayrton Senna, and then you just throw it down, throw it on the inside wherever you like. But no, I think the average width of the track is 9 metres all the way around. The distance from the first grid box to the first corner is less than FIA regulations by like 150 metres or something like that. It's shorter, the shortest circuit on the track by a significant margin. Obviously, it's all the excitement that it brings. The first 14 laps were just dull, really. The Max Verstappen got off the line, good reaction times, followed by Alonso. There wasn't any really major sort of talking points. I know Nico Hülkenberg got a little bit too giddy, probably, into the really tight hairpin, locked up, and ended up tapping Lance Stroll, and that was really most of the excitement for the first 14 laps. The only real major sort of talking point came at lap 14. Sainz clipped Ocon at the Nouvelle chicane and knocked his front left end plate from the Ferrari. But the new FIA rules that have come in recently say that if your front wing has demonstrated to have integrity with minimal damage, which this would be classed as minimal damage, then you are allowed to continue without a black flag. The real excitement started when we reached around lap 52. Now, bear in mind, Monaco has 78 laps because it's such a short circuit. We started to see rain around lap 52. 9 cars bunched up, creeping right round. It was a little bit sort of chaotic, really. I mean, we had some cars on inters, some cars on wets, some cars on dry tyres, right the way through until lap 55. I know Fernando Alonso went on to dry tyres at lap 55 and then immediately had to pit for intermediate tyres. Alonso repitted. When he rejoined, he was 22 seconds behind Max. It was pretty much Max's race at this point. Constant bumps and scrapes and cars running around onto escape roads, but really no safety cars. Ultimately, the final results were the exact same lineup as the grid for first, second and third, which is Max Verstappen finished on the top step, Alonso second, and a great result, real big shout out for Ocon and the Alpine team who finished in third, and it was actually Alpine's 50th race under the Alpine flag after the transition from Renault, so really good result from them. An update on the table standings then. So Max Verstappen leads the pack with 144 points, which is 39 points clear of his teammate Sergio Perez with 104 points. In third place, Aston Martin fans will be very pleased to know that Fernando Alonso is on 93 points, followed by both Mercedes drivers with 69 points and 50 points respectively for Hamilton and Russell. Special mention to Ocon as well, who picked up a solid 15 points today, which puts him 9th in the overall Drivers' Championship on 21 points. What do we think of the race?
I think the first 55 laps or so did scream Monaco Grand Prix for me.
Yeah.
It's apart from, really for me, the most exciting part was Magnussen on lap 18 going down towards the hairpin turn where he took over Sargent. The last minute dive down to the hairpin. But really, there wasn't too much going on. You had Sainz wing issue, which there was never a gap there at any point. You have Lando and Starry sort of getting to the points, but then steadied off, and then as the rain hit, back into the points. They're kind of a bit up and down. But for me, just a standard run-of-the-mill Monaco Grand Prix, even when the rain hit, was waiting for something to happen. The only thing that really happened was Stroll going over his wing and eventually just going off into an off-road and retiring from the race. There's nothing really that happened.
I think one of the funniest moments for me is a lap before the rain came, Yuki Tsunoda's engineer were coming on the radio and he was saying, you need to try and pull some distance away from Norris as he was catching, and he adjusted the brake balance remotely, which they can do in modern Formula 1 nowadays. He adjusted the brake balance, and Yuki was like, no, don't put me on the brake balance, do not put me on that brake balance. And then one lap later, he carried way too much speed into one of the corners and ended up having to use the escape road.
Could have braked.
And he was not a happy man.
Not at all. So if we move on to the vast amounts of football we've had this weekend, we'll start with the Premier League, of who's gone down. I mean, Southampton was already nailed on a few weeks ago. So, however, they got a 4-4 draw against Liverpool.
This season, though, doesn't seem to be a surprise result for Liverpool.
No.
They've conceded a lot of goals.
Yeah. Leeds going down after what, three years in the Premier League, going down. But I mean, they've had 2 managers this season. They got in Big Sam with 4 games to go, so that's a big ask. 4 games to rescue a season.
A lot of the Leeds fans obviously disappointed, but they're saying kind of let Big Sam do what he needs to do and regroup and have a couple of seasons in the Championship and then go for Premier League again.
The thing is with Leeds this year, he had some good results. They beat Liverpool at Anfield. They put up a good fight against Arsenal. So they've had some good games. It's just the issue with Leeds is they've got nothing. I feel they've got nothing up top. They've got a bit of an okay-ish defence. Very young goalkeeper, but he got replaced when Allardyce came in. With Robles coming in, which, I mean, he's played in the Premier League for a couple of years. He had a spell at Everton and whatnot. If you've got no out-and-out striker and you're conceding 70+ goals in a season, it's guaranteed you're going to go. Leicester going down as well. I mean, I thought Everton, personally, but Leicester going down. They won the Premier League, 7 years ago? They won the FA Cup 2 years ago. And they get relegated.
If Rodgers was still there.
I don't think it was that. I think they let a big part of that dressing room go in Kasper Schmeichel. Jamie Vardy, innit? You know, he scores, but he's getting on. They've not replaced him, so they've taken 2 main points of your team and not replaced them with any sort of calibre who can keep you in the Premier League, in my opinion. I wouldn't say the worst Premier League champions, because obviously, of course, it's only really them and Blackburn who have ever won it and then got relegated. But it took Blackburn... Well, Blackburn won it in the 94-95, but then got relegated in the 11-12 season. But in 7... So, I think they'll come back up. I think they'll just bounce straight back. Looking at the other leagues as well, in regards to winners, you got Feyenoord winning the Eredivisie, which is impressive. Napoli winning Serie A by a big margin, very big margin.
I don't think there would have been many football fans calling that at the start of the season.
No, you pretty much guarantee you're going to say either Juventus or one of the Milans.
Yeah, and I think Juve have had a pretty poor season.
Well, they had a 15-point deduction back in January. They got given that back, but then only as of a few days ago got a 10-point deduction. Not going to help. PSG winning Liga.
But they didn't win it a couple of years ago, so it's not really been an all-out sort of PSG league over the last sort of 5 or 6 years. I think they've got the capabilities to do that, and maybe there was just a few. I think there was just a few things that maybe didn't go their way through the year that hasn't helped. I think they concentrated a lot on the Champions League, for instance.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, you can say the same with the Scottish League with Celtic winning as well. You know, you can say it was a dominant league, Celtic do it all the time, but of course Rangers won it a few years back under Gerrard.
Celtic have got it now 11 out of 12 years. Granted, many of those without Rangers.
Yeah.
But for Celtic, as a club, it is about the Champions League and how far they go due to the finances.
Yeah, and again, same with the Bundesliga, with Bayern winning it for the 11th consecutive year. Dortmund could have done it, but a 2-2 draw with Mainz just wasn't enough. Bayern scoring pretty much in the depths of it as well. That Musiala scored. Good goal as well, actually. Very good goal. You've had your playoff finals this weekend. So you've had your League 2-1 today, which Carlisle won on penalties. Beat Stockport on penalties. You then had Coventry-Luton yesterday, which, if you'd have said 4 games into the season they're going to be in your playoff final, you'd have said no because they were the bottom 2.
I saw a stat, and in 2018, both Luton and Coventry were in the top 4 teams, with Wycombe and Accrington out of League 2. And then they both contended in the Championship playoff final.
It's amazing. I mean, I think it's nine years, is it, since they were in the 4th division of English football?
Yeah.
Which is one below League 2.
Now known as the Conference.
Yeah.
Now known as the Conference. So they've gone in 9 years. They've gone from that level to being in the playoff final to now next year playing in the Premier League.
Yeah.
So are you saying that in the next 8 years, Wrexham are going to be playing against Arsenal and Manchester United?
Possibly. I mean, I don't want to sound cliche, but anything is possible. And quite clearly, Luton have proved that. And there's been a couple of teams that haven't necessarily done it in as quick of a time frame or in such a dramatic fashion from 4th division all the way up to Premier League. But there has been success stories throughout football, and that's why it's a fantastic game that we can all love.
Mm. So yeah, I mean Luton, that's amazing what they've done. You've had a couple of finals coming up as well. You've got the FA Cup final next Saturday. Man City, Man United, so Manchester derby in the FA Cup final.
So that's before the release of our next podcast. So predictions?
Man City.
Score?
2-0.
I actually want Manchester United to win, because I think for them to come 3rd this year with a Carabao Cup and then win an FA Cup, where they've been since they last won the league in 2013, that is actually quite a successful season, I believe, under Ten Hag, and they are definitely going in the right direction. So for me, 1-0 Manchester United.
Okay.
I think it will be 3-0 City by half time.
Oh, that's a shout. By half time, wow, okay. A few days before that, you've got the Europa League final, which is Roma versus Sevilla. I mean, Roma, it's Jose Mourinho in a final.
But Sevilla this is their cup.
But they're Mr. Europa League, aren't they?
This is their cup, so I think that's got Sevilla in all over it as well.
I can see Roma. Tammy Abraham with the winner. And then, of course, on the 10th, you've got the Champions League final. Manchester City versus Inter Milan.
And I think just before we finish on football, one more shout out or a little bit of a discussion point is Newcastle United, Champions League football next year. As an influence of Saudi money?
Yes.
Or re-energising a deflated team?
I think a little bit of both. I think the money has helped. They've made some amazing signings, smart signings with the money. Guimaraes, Pope, Trippier, very good, strong signings. But I mean, it was always guaranteed, weren't it? If they was to get Champions League, everyone will go, that's the money.
Yeah.
That's done it. If they'd have done it under the old ownership, you'd have gone, that's very, very impressive.
I think for me, listening to Jake Humphrey's High Performance podcast with Kieran Trippier, and Kieran Trippier talking about the harmony amongst the squad and what Eddie Howe's trying to achieve there. I think with that, when you've got a squad of 23, 24 players all pulling in the same direction, I think we'll always outdo a team of maybe Crystal Palace that tries to lobby around one player.
Yeah.
When you've got 23, 24 players that ultimately, if he was saying if one is benched, if a player's benched, then they will have as much of an influence from the bench with the players as what around the changing room as what you would on the pitch. They are a team of players. Also this weekend we had the Rugby Union Gallagher Premiership final, which consisted of Saracens and Sale. After the top 4 teams went after the playoff, those 2 teams come in Rugby Union, top 4 teams, playoff, final, and then the winner. So you don't win the Premiership. If you win the league, you can still finish 2nd, 3rd, 4th and win the league through the playoff. Saracens, Sale, Saracens are the best team in the league. There's no two ways about that. You've got Owen Farrell, Nick Tompkins, Mario Toji, Varnapolu. They've got a fantastic team. Sale bringing in Ford from Leicester this year, which people were a bit unsure about, but in reality has probably been the standout player of the year at 10. They both traded early penalties early on at half time. You had Saracens up, which second half actually Sale won, but there was too big of a gap really for them to come back on. Saracens this year, 15 out of 20 wins in the league, with Sale 14 out of 20 wins. Saracens in the 2021 season was actually in the Championship, albeit via default.
I was going to say, was that something to do with like a points deduction or money or something like that?
Both. They broke financial fair play. So in rugby you have salary caps.
Yeah.
And there was a bit of a to do with how they were getting around it. So they got relegated. Unfortunately, through the COVID season, they played in the Championship, which.
So when they got relegated, in theory, did they keep that sort of calibre of player, or did they all sort of split and go to other, go to France like some of them do, or go to other big teams?
This is where there's a lot of inconsistencies. So the Championship don't have a salary cap. So they could have thrown more money at people to keep them for the season.
Yeah. So you're able to keep your Farrell, your Atoji, say, oh, we'll keep you on the same wage, or give you a little bit more because we're going to the Championship, just to come straight back up. It's like the parachute payment in football.
Potentially that is what happened.
Yeah.
However, they've kept the players, and I think as well, the players, they've all played there for a while, so there's a bit of love there. Get them back where they need to be, and within 2 years, they've won the league. Obviously, Sarries, they came up, they made the final last year, they lost that. I think for me, we will probably look at Saracens winning that league over the next few years, consistently, while they've got that crop of England players or even international players. They've got people coming through, they've got depth in that squad. I just cannot see beyond Sarries taking that league over the next few years. They just, if they can keep Farrell, Daly, Good, they've got the young scrum half coming through, Varnapolu, they've got the players that will see them for the next 6, 7, 8 years easy.
So, jumping back a week or so, back to the PGA Championship from May the 18th from Oak Hills. Just rundown of the results from that weekend before we move on to a little bit of a talking topic in Michael Block. The top 3 was a joint second with 7 under for the weekend in Victor Hovland of Norway and Scotty Scheffler of the United States, but with a dominant second and third day at Oak Hills, Brooke Koepka, wins with 9 under. But I think the real story for the weekend, and I know you, Tom, are into your golf a little bit, was that of Michael Block. To give the listeners a little bit of context, if you've not heard of this guy, one of 28,000 PGA pros. Now, these pros are different to the pros that you see on the tour. These pros are the pros that, I'm saying pros an awful lot, but these pros are the heads of the golf course, and these are the ones that give the juniors the training. They host the academy days when at the local golf courses around America. 28,000, and he was one of the few selected to play at this weekend. And not only did he play, but he had an absolutely blinding weekend, and he ended up finishing 15th overall for the 4 days.
With his hole-in-one that took him from 2 over to par.
Yes, which was absolutely fantastic. I mean, it was a slam dunk. He took a confident swing, up and down, straight to the hole. No roll, no bounce, no nothing. Slam dunk.
I've been very fortunate through my sporting life, and I've played golf with people that have played on the tour, the European tour, and one in particular that still is a club pro that played on the PGA tour. And what these guys can do, and what he could do, was absolutely unbelievable to watch. On a par 3, I'm going to do this here, and within inches doing exactly that. So to be at that level but not quite the top, and let's be fair, top 15 of a PGA Championship are the top of the game.
Yeah.
To come in that top 15 and not even be that elite level is phenomenal. And I'd not heard of Michael Block before the PGA Championship.
Yeah. Bit of an overnight celebrity, really. He has been successful in the past. So I can't remember. I was watching an interview with him. I think it's like 2011 or something like that. He has played golf all his life, and he has been a pro at his local golf course in California for a number of years as well. But his second largest purse pickup was $78,000, which is still not pocket change. But this time around, he did win $238,000 or so. Unfortunately, we're recording this on the 28th, so it's just been the Charles Schwab Challenge, and unfortunately Michael Block's been humbled this time around, finishing dead last. Whether he can make a comeback and whether we'll see him on future PGA tours is yet to be seen, but he's definitely secured a place again in 2024 for the same Open at Oak Hills.
Just to give Brooks a little bit of a kudos and a little bit of a shout out, that's his 5th major, and he's 3rd in the stroke play era on majors. He joins a prestigious club of Jack Nicklaus and Tiger Woods of 3 PGA Tour championships.
So do you feel then, at the end of his career, he'll be in the same discussions as your Tiger Woods, your Nicholsons? Do you think he'll be within that calibre, or do you think there's people kind of above him, but we don't see them as much because they're on that live golf?
I think for me, in the last 10 to 15 years of players, I think the only one that would nearly enter that conversation would be Jordan Spieth, when he went through 3 or 4 years of winning multiple majors. Brooks has gone to live, and he's done it for his family, and him and his wife are expecting, and I wish them all the very best for that. I just struggle to not accept, but live tour players can play on majors but not on the PGA, and I think that over time, as they get used to their 3-day format, a little bit more entertainment based golf, which is great as well. I will always be a PGA fan, that's my opinion. I think they will start to maybe come unstuck on the 4-day system. this week also saw 3 world title fights in the UK, which I think is probably a little bit excessive because for the fans, there's 3 world title fights to watch. It becomes very, very hard. You had Conlon, unfortunately lost with quite a brutal left uppercut. I think for him, off the back of his last loss, he now needs to really evaluate what level he's boxing at. Woods won on points, and then you had the Okoli Billum Smith fight, which for me was the standout fight, especially after Lara with Conlon had gone over on his weight, which caused him to be stripped of the title, which meant Conlon just had to win and he was world champion. But with the Okoli Billum Smith fight, you had a world title on the line with an undefeated boxer. But that fight at the Vitality Stadium, probably for me, in 25, nearly 30 years of watching boxing quite heavily, was probably one of the poorest fights I've ever seen.
Was he about 19-0, weren't he, Okoli?
Yeah, 19-0, yeah.
And the way he was hugging him the entire fight, you then think, how?
I think for context here, he must have had a game plan of wearing Billum Smith down late on in the fight and going after him and getting the knockout, because the hugging, the leaning, the grabbing, when in reality he wasn't touched. He did go down a couple of times. He got put down twice, to the massive delight of the Bournemouth people. He really was wearing them down, and the referee deducted 2 points. The referee deducted 2 points from him with 3 knockdowns.
And didn't you say as well, one of the judges gave the whole thing as a draw?
Yes, which,
I mean, that's crazy.
Again, just circling back to like the 100 and the Live Tour. Recently, do you not think that boxing is less of a sport than it was 20 years ago, 10 years ago, even 5 years ago? Like, there's not these huge headline bouts, and you've got not only the lack of headline bouts, but you've also got silly YouTubers, and you've also got like MMA fights and things like that, and it's demoralising the sport.
So you've just touched on something I was about to say then. So to me, with boxing, you've got sort of 2 calibers to it, as it were. You've got your professionals, your AJs, Usyk, etc., and then you've got what gets put in the limelight, your KSI and all that.
You've almost got the 2 formats of PJ and Live. You've got your boxing and your social media influencer boxing.
Yeah, and when you look at boxing now, you say, "Oh, name me a boxer." Can guarantee someone's going to say KSI, Jake Paul, one of these guys, because that's plus all over Sky Sports. Sky Sports promoted one of those fights, and it's like they're not even professionals. They're just a bunch of social media YouTubers who are multi-millionaires before even getting into that sport, and then you're taking it away from fights such as Okoli Billum Smith yesterday. I watch Sky Sports News a lot, and I didn't even know that fight was on until Friday.
I think there's a new channel, isn't there, that's just been launched, dedicated to these sort of, I don't know if it's dedicated to the silly fights, but it's dedicated to boxing. DAZN, is it?
DAZN, yeah.
DAZN.
DAZN or whatever it is. But at first, they were getting some good fights. During COVID is where they were doing the fights that were out of Hearn's back garden, and they were some good fights. They were literally out of his back garden. Yeah, it's hilarious.
I did not know that. I genuinely didn't know that.
I think
it almost... Sorry, go on.
DAZN has rivaled Matchroom as a platform, and they've taken Anthony Joshua's fights, and Fury fights have been on there. And initially, I subscribed when it used to be $1.99 a month. It was fantastic, and then suddenly it jumped up to a tenner. And when they did that, is when they didn't really get any headline fights. So for me, I cancelled it because I didn't see the value in it. Whereas initially there was a lot of your Lopez's, your good American, Mexican welterweights and things were in there, but it's just not there anymore.
Some of these YouTubers and idiot social media influencers make Rio Ferdinand and Freddie Flintoff look like Muhammad Ali.
There was another fight this week. Joseph Parker with a first round knockout on Wednesday night. Now, Parker, he lost to Joshua, lost to Dillian White, he lost to Joe Joyce in a really good fight, but does Parker warrant another big fight? Does he take on a Povetkin? Does he take on a Wilder? There's a talk of Fury Joshua happening in September. Where does that leave? For me, it's Dillian White Wilder next because he was mandatory 3 years ago. What does Parker do next? He's not quite hit that world level. But what else or who else is there for him?
I mean, maybe Usyk. He can have a crack at that. That'd be a very good fight. That.
Would you not think Wilder White eliminator for Usyk? I think Parker Usyk would be a good fight because you've got a fast hard hitter in Usyk coming up the weights with Parker that's never really been troubled by a punch.
No. Yeah, maybe as you said, sort of an eliminator kind of thing. But I just feel he needs a fight like that against Usyk maybe before he gets that opportunity again against a Wilder or maybe even a Joshua again or something like that. I just feel he needs a big name again before he gets the other big names, as it were.
I think for me, we need to see the Fury Joshua fight happen. Personally, I think we are 2 years too late. We've gone down the Mayweather-Pacquiao route again of these fights happening too late in people's career. This day and age, I understand why, because people try and hold on to an unbeaten record. I don't believe Fury's done that and dodged Joshua. I think early on it was Joshua dodging Fury.
Yeah, definitely. Mm-hmm.
I do wish these fights sometimes would happen earlier in people's career. Also, for me, a very exciting fight was meant to happen July 1st in Liam Smith and Chris Eubank Jr. but unfortunately Liam Smith injury has continued. That fight's been postponed and hopefully they get that back on soon, because I think for me everything that went on leading up to that first fight, I'd love to see that again.
Yeah.
And I'd love to see that fight happen.
Premier League darts final on the 25th. I think we're all massive darts fans, aren't we? Michael van Gerwen officially now a record breaker. On the 25th of May, he beat Gerwin price 11-5, which arguably in a Premier League final is a relatively dominant score. I think we'd all agree.
Yeah.
With a finishing average of 105.4, his victory at the London's O2 puts him past the legendary Phil Taylor, which was jointly held on 6 Premier League victories, into which Van Gerwen steps into unknown territory.
I think for me, Van Gerwen is probably the best player we've ever seen. I just feel that with Phil Taylor, who in his time was phenomenal, there's no two ways about it. He only really came up against Raymond van Barneveld.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Van Gerwen's lost world titles to Rob Cross. You've got Michael Smith, you've got Peter Wright, Gary Anderson. You've got, for me, there's more greater players around him now, which may prevent him from getting to Phil Taylor's outstanding figures. But as an individual, I think that Van Gerwen is a better player. There's a lot more competition for Van Gerwen around than there was for Phil Taylor.
That's why I would probably deem him a better player, because he's got, as you said, more very high level competition in every tournament And I feel he will just exceed what Phil Taylor did. The other side of the pond, we've had a big week in some US sports, mainly around the basketball. You've had the Lakers get just completely demolished by the Denver Nuggets, 4-0 in the series.
Complete whitewash.
Oh, 100%, yeah. I don't think anybody saw it coming because, I mean, you've got the Lakers, you've got LeBron, you've got Anthony Davis, you got some good players, and then you've got the Denver Nuggets. So, yeah, so that was back. Their final game is the 23rd of May, so they've got a bit of time to sort of get ready for the finals. Who's it going to be? I mean, you've either got the Boston Celtics or the Miami Heat.
And that's gone down to Game 7.
That's gone to Game 7, so Celtics beat the Heat yesterday with 0.1 seconds to go to win it by a point.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's down to the line.
I can't think of many sports, even in Formula One, even in all the 100 metres. I've never really gotten into basketball, but I do believe that the fine margins of these clutch throws where they call a timeout, there's a second and a half on the clock, they're down by 1, they're down by 2, and they've got to make this play to hit the three throw, hit the bucket. I can't think of a sport. In NFL, you've got your Hail Marys, and let's be fair, it's pot luck. But in the NBA, these things happen week in, week out, all the time. There's not a more exciting finish, I don't think, in many sports.
Am I right in saying that, I mean, the game rules potentially are set up to allow these big wow finishes anyway? Because am I right in saying if the clock runs down, as long as the ball is in flight, then the point still counts?
Yeah, so kind of going back on that, so about 2 weeks ago, it was the Boston Celtics, against Philadelphia 76ers. It was game 3, so it was 1-1 in the series. Game 3, and the 76ers, which is my team, were up by a point, and the Celtics player got the ball off about a millisecond after the buzzer, but it went in, so they were like, oh, we've won the game, but they've had to, but the buzzer's gone. They've had to then go to their equivalent of VAR to review it, to then say, no, it didn't go in. That's how fine it can be, because when you will then watch the slow motion replay, it's still on his fingertips just as the buzzer goes. That's how fine of a margin that sport can be.
I think it's crazy that in basketball you have that kind of technology that it needs, and we see it across other sports, VAR. And there's an event going on at the minute we haven't touched on today because it's still very early days, in the French Open. In Wimbledon, there's Hawkeye for the line calls and things like that. In the French Open, they don't have it. They don't have any.
Well, they've had the Hawkeye for years. As long as I've been watching Wimbledon, which I used to watch it with my grandparents, which probably, you're talking 12 plus years ago, they've always had this Hawkeye technology. And it is a very basic one compared to...
But it's not a sports technology. It's a venue technology. They don't have it across all the venues. Back to you.
Yeah, so which in basketball can and does help. I've seen finals go down to that technology.
Yeah.
And titles be decided off of that technology.
I think technology in sport is definitely a conversation that we could fill an entire podcast with, because there's just unbelievable advances in technology, but that not only allow us to regulate the game, but also to understand it in terms of analytics. Well, to understand the games that we enjoy in such intricate detail, which adds to the enjoyment, in my opinion.
Yeah, so kind of touching back on one of my previous topics, which was football.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen La Liga next season aren't using goal line technology.
And it's all over 3 million.
3 million euros.
Which in that elite level of sport is such a drop in the pond.
Yeah, that will even cover Vinicius Junior's wages for half a week probably, kind of thing.
And they're not.
Using it. Yeah.
But do you think then? And I don't know whose decision that is up the board and things like that. I believe if you put it to a vote with the Premier League's owned by the clubs, they become stakeholders as they get relegated and promoted. If that was put to the clubs to bring in that technology and not the FA, do you think that would get demolished from the Premier League? Because I know I certainly would.
Goal line technology?
Or VAR.
VAR as a general.
VAR, yes, because there's some very ropey decisions. Goal line technology, no, you'd keep it, 100%. 100%. Yeah, so with the Stanley Cup then, you've got the Golden Knights leading their series against the Stars 3-2. They play on our Tuesday morning, i.e. America's Monday night. The Panthers actually, they beat the Hurricanes 4-0 in their series, so the Panthers are through. So it's really just to decide the Knights and the Stars, which, of course, if the Knights win on Monday night, i.e. Tuesday morning, it's going to be a Panthers-Knights final, which for the Vegas Knights will be very impressive because they're relatively a very new team.
They are very new.
Definitely
very new.
The last 6-7 years.
Well, you've been to the stadium, haven't you?
I went to the very first game that the Knights played when they opened at the stadium in Las Vegas, obviously, and I think it was 2000 and it was 7 years ago. I can't remember. I have to work it out, but they are a relatively new team. So to achieve what they have achieved in such a short amount of time, to be able to play in the Stanley Cup final is really, really good.
Yeah, definitely.
And as well, this evening while we've been recording this, Canada have won the IIHF World Championships against Germany 5-2 in that we saw quite a physical, exciting game as well.
Very, very good game. But again, Canada winning ice hockey is like saying water's wet, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like, I'll be honest, it's like Scotland winning the Elephant Polo World Championships.
So that's it. Our first Sportscast podcast roundup of last week's sports. We've looked ahead to a couple of bits that's potentially happening in the next couple of weeks. Thank you so much for listening. We appreciate all your support. Please subscribe and bookmark us on the relevant platform that you're listening to us, and we would really appreciate if you were to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at SportscastPodUK. And if you've got a topic of conversation that you'd like us to cover, or you'd like to leave us your reviews or opinions, please give us an email as well at sportscastpod@gmail.com. I've been Jordan.
I've been Liam.
And I've been Tom.
And you've been listening to Sportscast Podcast.